The morning rush at Sunshine Cafe always felt like a storm. A storm of coffee orders, breakfast plates, and customers who needed to be somewhere 10 minutes ago. And in the middle of this storm stood Maya Santos, notepad in hand. A tired smile fixed on her face as she moved between tables with the grace of someone who had done this dance 1,000 times before. 2 eggs over easy. Side of bacon, wheat toast, she called out, sliding the order through the kitchen window. Chef Lou nodded without looking up, his hands already reaching for eggs. Maya tucked a stray hair behind her ear and glanced at the clock. 7:43 a.m. She'd been on her feet since 5, and her shift wouldn't end until 3. Another long day stretched ahead, identical to hundreds before it. At 27, this wasn't where Maya had pictured herself. 5 years of serving pancakes and pouring coffee while her real dreams collected dust in the corner of her tiny apartment. But bills needed paying, and dreams didn't cover rent. Coffee refill, please, called a businessman from table 8, not bothering to look up from his phone. Coming right up, Maya replied, already reaching for the coffee pot. As she filled his cup, her eyes drifted to the window. Outside, people hurried down the sidewalk, most wearing headphones, lost in their own private soundtracks. Music. Always back to music. Last night, she'd stayed up until 2 in the morning working on a new song. The melody had come to her while washing dishes during her shift, and she'd hummed it quietly to herself for hours, afraid of losing it before she could get home to her guitar. Now she was running on 3 hours of sleep, but it had been worth it. The song was good, maybe the best she'd written yet. Order up. Chef Lou's voice snapped her back to reality. Maya balanced 3 plates along her arm with expert precision. Table 5 needed their breakfast, music would have to wait. It always did. The morning rush gradually eased into the steadier rhythm of late breakfast. Maya finally had a moment to catch her breath by the coffee station. She pulled a small notepad from her apron pocket and quickly jotted down a line that had been floating in her head. Waiting for someday while today slips away. She stared at the words, then added, bridge? Key change after second chorus? Writing in your diary again? Maya jumped, quickly tucking the notepad away. Danny, the other morning waitress, stood beside her with an amused smile. Danny was in her 40s, had been working at Sunshine for nearly 20 years, and treated the cafe like her second home. Just some notes, Maya said. Your notes are all over the place. Found one in the sugar container yesterday. Something about melody like rainfall or whatever. Maya felt her cheeks warm. Sorry about that. Don't be sorry, honey. We all need something to keep us going. Danny grabbed a coffee pot. Just maybe keep your songwriting out of the sugar. Maya smiled, grateful that Danny had figured out her secret but kept it between them. Most of the staff knew she wrote music, but they didn't know how seriously she took it. How could they? Maya barely admitted it to herself most days. The bell above the door chimed. A new customer, a woman in her early 30s with paint-splattered jeans and a portfolio case, chose a corner table by the window. Something about her caught Maya's attention. Maybe it was the confident way she claimed the space, spreading sketches across the table as if this cafe corner was her personal studio. I'll take that one, Maya told Danny. As Maya approached, the woman gathered some of her drawings to make space. Just coffee, please, black. Maya nodded, but her eyes were drawn to the sketches, vibrant street scenes and cafe interiors, including one that looked remarkably like Sunshine. These are amazing, Maya said before she could stop herself. The woman looked up, surprised. Thanks, I'm working on a series about city life. Small moments, you know. Places where people cross paths. Like cafes. Exactly like cafes. The woman smiled. I'm Prisha. Maya, I'll get your coffee. Throughout the morning, whenever Maya had a free moment, her eyes drifted to Prisha's corner. Here was someone actually doing it, turning her art into her life's work. The sketchbook reminded Maya of her own notebooks filled with lyrics and chord progressions, stuffed under her bed at home. During her break, Maya sat in the back room with a cup of soup and her notepad. She wrote quickly, inspired by Prisha and her fearlessness. Words flowed easily for once. Watching others live their truth, while mine sits collecting dust every day saying someday soon, but soon never seems to come for us. The back door opened, and Joe, the cafe owner, walked in with a stack of invoices. In his 60s with salt and pepper hair, Joe had owned Sunshine for over 30 years. He nodded at Maya. Taking 5? Yes, sorry, just finishing up. Joe waved away her apology. You're entitled to your break, kid. He gestured to her notepad. More songs? Maya hesitated, then nodded. Most bosses wouldn't remember such a detail about their employees, but Joe was different. He'd caught her humming original melodies while restocking once and asked about them. Since then, he occasionally asked how her music was going, though Maya kept her answers vague. You know, Joe said, settling into a chair with a groan. My sister was a singer. Back in the 80s, she was sure she was going to be the next big thing. What happened? Maya asked, though she could guess. Life. Bills. Fear, mostly. He shuffled papers without looking at them. She's a music teacher now. Loves it, but sometimes I catch her watching young performers with this look. He shook his head. Anyway, don't mind the ramblings of an old man. The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers. Maya moved between tables automatically. Her mind split between work and snippets of lyrics. By now, she'd mastered the art of being physically present while mentally composing. She'd hum quietly while refilling water glasses, working out melodies that might otherwise slip away. At table 7, a group of college students were discussing a concert they'd attended the night before. The opening act was better than the headliner, one said. Some local band I'd never heard of. That's how it starts, though, another replied. Playing small venues, building a following? Not everyone gets discovered on the internet. Maya lingered while taking their order, absorbing their conversation. How many local shows had she attended? Watching performers no more talented than she was. Wondering why they were on stage while she served tables. The truth was uncomfortable but simple. They had tried. They had taken the risk she kept avoiding. Near the end of her shift, Maya noticed Prisha was still at her corner table, now talking with an older man in a suit. Their conversation seemed intense, with Prisha occasionally pointing to different sketches. The man nodded, looking impressed. As Maya approached to check if they needed anything, she overheard snippets. A gallery showing next month. Series has real potential. Already sold 3 pieces from your last collection. Maya set down fresh coffee without interrupting, a familiar ache spreading in her chest. This was what pursuit looked like, not just creation, but putting your work into the world, letting it be seen, judged, possibly rejected. When was the last time anyone besides her bedroom walls had heard her music? The cafe emptied as afternoon stretched on. Maya wiped down tables, refilled condiments, and tried not to think about the evening ahead. Another night of playing guitar in her apartment with the windows closed so neighbors wouldn't hear. As she was collecting salt and pepper shakers, she noticed a napkin left at Prisha's now empty table. On it was a quick sketch of Maya herself, captured in a moment of distraction, looking out the window with an expression that somehow perfectly captured the longing she felt. Below the drawing was a note. The waitress with music in her eyes. Thanks for the inspiration. Maya carefully folded the napkin and placed it in her pocket next to her notepad. Something about being seen, truly seen by a stranger, made her throat tight. Later, as she hung up her apron, Joe approached with her day's tips and schedule for next week. Good shift today, he said. Maya nodded, though she barely remembered most of it. Hey, I meant to ask, we're doing an open mic night here next Thursday evening. Nothing fancy, just trying to bring in some evening business. Thought maybe you'd want to. He left the invitation hanging. Maya's heart jumped to her throat. I've never actually performed for... Just think about it, Joe said, patting her shoulder. No pressure, but there was pressure. Not from Joe, but from within. From 5 years of waiting tables while writing songs no one heard. From watching others live their dreams while she played it safe. Walking home in the fading light, Maya pulled out her phone and looked at her music folder. 126 voice memos. 57 completed songs, all private, all hidden. Her fingers hovered over one recorded just last week. She pressed play and held the phone to her ear, listening critically to her own voice singing about missed chances and parallel lives. It wasn't bad. It might even be good. At her apartment door, she made a decision. She would sign up for the open mic. 1 song, just to know how it felt. Inside, she headed straight for her guitar, leaning against the wall where she'd left it that morning. She had 1 week to prepare, 1 week to find the courage that others seem to have in abundance. She picked up a pen and opened her notebook to a blank page. At the top, she wrote, Notes from the cafe. the beginning of something that no longer felt like just a dream. The week leading up to the open mic night passed in a blur for Maya. By day, she took orders and served food with her body on autopilot, while her mind sorted through lyrics and chord progressions. By night, she practiced until her fingertips were sore and her voice grew hoarse. She had chosen a song called Invisible, something she'd written last year after a particularly long shift, when it seemed no customer had actually looked at her face. Thursday arrived with the weight of possibility. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she tied her apron for the morning shift. Joe had put up a small chalkboard sign by the entrance. Tonight, open mic, 7-9 p.m. Local talent welcome. You still on for tonight? Danny asked, catching Maya staring at the sign. I think so, Maya replied, her stomach tightening. If I don't back out. You won't, Danny said firmly. I'm coming in on my night off just to hear you. No pressure, Maya groaned. That's exactly what pressure feels like. The morning crowd was typical. Regulars who wanted their usual orders, business people with laptops open during breakfast meetings, and the occasional tourist wandering in from nearby hotels. Maya moved between tables, coffee pot in hand, trying to focus on the present rather than the evening ahead. You seem distracted today, said an older man at table 12, one of the regulars who came in nearly every morning. He always ordered the same thing, black coffee, 2 eggs scrambled soft, dry toast. He usually sat quietly with a newspaper, rarely engaging beyond placing his order. Sorry, Maya said, refilling his cup. Just a lot on my mind. The man folded his newspaper and looked at her properly for perhaps the first time in the 3 years he'd been coming to Sunshine Cafe. The open mic? Maya blinked in surprise. How did you know? He gestured toward the chalkboard. Joe mentioned you might perform. Said you write your own songs? Oh. Maya felt heat rise to her face. She hadn't realized Joe had been talking about her to the customers. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. The man nodded thoughtfully. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and deep lines that spoke of a life fully lived. First time performing? That obvious, huh? The look of terror gives it away. His smile was gentle. I'm Lee, by the way. Since we're actually having a conversation after 3 years of me ordering eggs. Maya. She shifted the coffee pot to her other hand. And yes, first time. Probably last time too. Lee chuckled. We'll see about that. He opened his newspaper again. A signal the conversation had ended. The lunch rush kept Maya too busy to worry about the evening ahead. By mid-afternoon, however, her nerves had returned full force. During her break, she retreated to the storage room and quietly ran through her song once more. The lyrics felt suddenly juvenile, the melody too simple. What had seemed beautiful in the privacy of her apartment now felt embarrassingly amateur. You'll be great, came Joe's voice from the doorway. Maya jumped, nearly knocking over a stack of napkins. Don't sneak up on people. Wasn't sneaking. You were in your own world. Joe leaned against the doorframe. Listen, I've been meaning to tell you, no pressure about tonight. If you change your mind, it's fine. The offer of an easy way out was tempting. Maya looked down at her hands. I'm scared, she admitted. But I think I need to do this. Joe nodded. For what it's worth, I believe in you, kid. By 6 o'clock, the cafe had transformed. Joe and the evening staff had pushed tables to create a small performance area. A modest sound system was set up, just a microphone on a stand and 2 speakers. People began trickling in. Some regulars, others new faces drawn by the promise of live music and the special evening menu. Maya changed in the bathroom, swapping her waitress uniform for jeans and a blue blouse she'd deliberated over for days. She let her hair down from its usual work ponytail and applied a touch of lipstick. The person in the mirror looked both familiar and strange. Still Maya, but a version of herself that had been waiting in the wings. Danny arrived with 2 friends, claiming a table near the front and waving enthusiastically. Chef Lou had stayed after his shift, sitting at the counter with a beer. Even Prisha had returned, sketchbook in hand, settling into her usual corner spot. Maya paced in the back room, guitar case clutched in her hand. Joe had put her third in the lineup, after a college kid playing covers and a middle-aged woman who wrote poems. Not first, so you're not setting the tone for the night, but early enough that you won't psych yourself out waiting, he'd explained. The first performer began, a shaggy-haired boy with a pleasant voice singing a popular folk song. The small crowd applauded warmly. Maya peeked out from behind the kitchen door. counting at least 25 people. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This had been a mistake.
She should never have. You're not thinking of running, are you?
Maya turned to find Lee standing behind her, a cup of coffee in his hand. The thought crossed my mind, she admitted. Lee leaned against the wall. You know, I've been watching you write songs on napkins and receipt backs for 3 years. You have? He nodded. I sit at the same table every day. Notice things. You hum when you think no one's listening. Tap rhythms on the coffee pot. Music's in you whether you share it or not. He took a sip of coffee, but it's better when shared. The first performer finished to enthusiastic applause. The poet took the microphone next, her voice steady as she read about changing seasons and the passage of time. I'm not sure I can do this, Maya whispered, more to herself than to Lee. Then don't, Lee said simply. But I suspect you'll regret it if you don't try. Something in his tone made Maya look at him more closely. You sound like you know about regret. A shadow passed over Lee's face. More than I care to admit, he straightened up. The poet's almost done. Decision time, Maya. The poet finished her last piece and Joe stepped up to introduce the next performer. Next up, someone special to us here at Sunshine. You know her as the woman who remembers exactly how you like your eggs, but tonight you'll know her as a songwriter. Please welcome our very own Maya Santos. A moment of silence. Then surprisingly strong applause led by Danny's enthusiastic whooping. Maya felt Lee's hand on her shoulder, giving a gentle push forward. Go on, he said quietly. They're waiting. Maya's legs carried her forward as if belonging to someone else. The short walk to the microphone felt like crossing an ocean. She set her guitar case down and removed her instrument with trembling hands. Hi, she said into the microphone, her voice barely audible. She cleared her throat and tried again. Hi, I'm Maya. I've probably served most of you coffee at some point. A few chuckles from the audience eased the tightness in her chest slightly. This is a song I wrote called Invisible. It's about feeling unseen. She positioned her fingers on the frets, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes came out shaky, but by the first verse, muscle memory took over. She kept her eyes fixed on her guitar, too nervous to look at the audience. Pass me by. Look right through. Another face in the crowd to you. I pour your coffee. I serve your food, wonder if you'd notice if I never came back. As she moved into the chorus, something shifted. The cafe faded away and there was only the music. The thing she'd kept hidden for so long now filling the room. Her voice grew stronger, more confident. When she finally dared to look up, she was met with attentive faces. People actually listening, not just hearing background noise while they ate, but truly listening to her words. Her story. I've been invisible for so long. I'm not sure I know how to be seen, but there's a voice inside that's growing strong, saying it's time to live more than this in-between. She found Danny in the crowd, beaming with pride. Joe at the back, arms crossed, nodding in rhythm. And Lee, still standing by the kitchen door, a strange expression on his face, something between recognition and respect. The final chorus built to a bridge Maya had added just days ago. What if tomorrow I stepped into the light? What if I finally gave this dream a chance? What if all this waiting was just wasted time? What if invisible isn't what I'm meant to be? She strummed the final chord and let it ring, her breath catching as silence filled the room. For one terrible moment she thought she'd failed completely. Then the applause began, hesitant at first, then building into something genuine and warm. Danny stood up, clapping above her head. Chef Lou whistled through his fingers. Maya felt tears threatening and blinked rapidly. Thank you, she managed before carefully returning her guitar to its case and hurrying off to the side. Her heart was racing, her hands still shaking, but now from adrenaline rather than fear. She'd done it. Whether good or bad, she'd finally shared her music with actual people. The next performer was already setting up as Maya slipped toward the back of the cafe. People smiled at her as she passed, a few patting her arm or shoulder. Danny pulled her into a quick hug, saying something about keeping secrets and, why didn't you tell me you were that good? Maya was still processing what had just happened when Lee appeared beside her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered one to her. Well, he asked. I didn't die of embarrassment, so that's something. Maya replied, accepting the coffee with still trembling hands. No, you didn't. Lee's expression was serious now, evaluating. You've got something, Maya. Raw, needs work, but definitely something. The way he said it didn't sound like casual praise. It sounded like assessment. What do you mean? Lee reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the counter to her. Robert Klein, Blue Note Records, retired. It read with a phone number beneath. You were in the music business? Maya stared at him. 37 years, Lee, or Robert, confirmed. I've heard a lot of first performances in my time. Yours. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Yours made me want to hear a second. Maya looked at the card, then back at the man she'd been serving eggs to for 3 years without really seeing. Why are you giving me this? Call me tomorrow, he said simply. We should talk about your music, properly. He walked away, leaving Maya holding his card and a future suddenly less invisible than it had been just an hour before. Maya stared at Robert's business card for most of the night. She'd placed it on her kitchen counter and glanced at it while making tea, while brushing her teeth and during her midnight snack. By morning, she had almost convinced herself the whole thing had been some kind of dream. But the card was still there when she woke up, and the memory of standing on that makeshift stage was too vivid to be imagination. Her phone showed several text messages from Danny. You were amazing. Why have you been hiding that voice? Everyone at the cafe is talking about you. Maya got ready for her morning shift in a daze. She had the day's early shift starting at 6 a.m., which meant facing Joe and anyone else who had witnessed her performance just hours earlier. Part of her wanted to call in sick, to hide under her blankets and process everything that had happened. But a stronger part, a part that had awakened on that small stage, pushed her forward. The cafe was quiet when she arrived. Just Joe setting up the coffee machines and Chef Lou prepping in the kitchen. There she is, Joe said, a proud smile spreading across his face. Our star performer. Maya felt her cheeks warm. Hardly a star. You were good, kid, real good. Got a lot of positive feedback after you left. I didn't exactly stick around, Maya admitted. She had hurried home shortly after her performance, too overwhelmed to socialize. Well, people noticed. Got a few asking if you'll perform again. The idea sent a fresh wave of nerves through her stomach. I don't know about that, Joe shrugged. Just saying there's an audience if you want it. He handed her an apron. Oh, and your friend Lee, or Robert, I guess, asked what time you'd be in today. Told him your schedule. Maya nodded, her heart beating a little faster at the mention of Robert. Would he really come in? What would she say to him? The morning proceeded normally on the surface. Maya took orders, refilled coffee, and cleared tables. But beneath the routine, everything felt different. Regular customers who had attended the open mic congratulated her. A college student asked if she had music online anywhere. Even Chef Lou, a man of few words, had mumbled, "Good job last night," when handing her an order. It was nearly 10 a.m. when Robert arrived, dressed in his usual understated sweater and slacks. He took his regular table by the window, newspaper tucked under his arm. Maya approached, coffee pot in hand, suddenly nervous in a way she hadn't been during their hundreds of previous interactions. Good morning, she said, pouring his coffee. The usual? Please. Robert folded his newspaper neatly. Did you sleep at all? Or did you spend the night overthinking everything about your performance? Maya laughed despite herself. Is it that obvious? It's that normal. First times are hard to process. She jotted down his breakfast order more out of habit than necessity. She knew it by heart. I'll put this right in. Maya, he called as she turned to leave. When's your break today? 11. Join me then? I meant what I said about talking. The next hour crawled by. Maya moved mechanically through her tasks while her mind raced with questions. What exactly did Robert want to discuss? Was this just kindness from an old man who felt sorry for her? Or was there something more to it? At precisely 11, Danny took over Maya's section. Go talk to your music man, she whispered with a wink. The whole staff knows something's up. Maya slipped into the chair across from Robert, setting down her cup of tea with slightly shaking hands. So, she began awkwardly, you were in the music business. A lifetime ago, Robert confirmed. Started as a sound engineer in the 70s, worked my way up to A&R at Blue Note Records. Spent almost 4 decades listening to people play, deciding who got a chance and who didn't. And now you eat eggs at Sunshine Cafe every morning. Robert smiled. Retirement suits me better than I expected, but old habits die hard. I still listen, still spot talent. He took a sip of coffee. Your song last night, how many have you written? Finished ones. Maybe 50 or 60? Robert's eyebrows rose. Recorded any of them? Just on my phone. Nothing professional. May I hear some? Maya hesitated, then pulled out her phone, scrolling through her voice memos to a folder labeled Songs. She handed Robert her phone with the playlist open. These are the ones I think are least terrible. He accepted the phone and a pair of earbuds Maya offered from her pocket. For the next 15 minutes, Maya watched Robert's face as he listened to 5 of her songs. His expression remained neutral, occasionally nodding slightly or tapping a finger against the table in rhythm. When he finally removed the earbuds, Maya could barely breathe waiting for his assessment. You need a proper demo, he said simply. What? These recordings don't do your songs justice. The writing is good, rough around the edges, but authentic. Your voice has something unique. But phone recordings and what I assume is your bathroom won't get you anywhere. I can't afford studio time, Maya said, reality crushing the momentary hope. And I wouldn't even know where to start. Robert leaned forward. I know people. Studio owners who owe me favors. Producers looking for new talent. I can't promise anything big, Maya. The industry has changed since my day. But I can help you make a proper demo, get it to the right ears. Maya stared at him, searching for the catch. Why would you do that for me? Robert was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the window. I retired 5 years ago. Know what I've done since then? Absolutely nothing that matters. He looked back at her. I spent my career finding talent, helping artists be heard. That was the part I loved. Not the contracts or the politics, just finding that raw potential and helping shape it. He shrugged. Maybe I miss it. So I'm your retirement project? Maya asked, not entirely sure how to feel about that. You're a talented songwriter who serves me eggs. I'm a bored former executive with connections and time on my hands. Seems like a fortunate coincidence to me. Maya's break was nearly over. She could see Danny glancing their way, curious. I need to get back to work, she said, standing. This is a lot to process, Robert nodded. Think about it. If you're interested, I'll make some calls. But Maya, his expression grew serious. This would mean taking time away from this job, investing in recording, maybe even performing more. Are you willing to take that leap? The question hung in the air as Maya returned to work, moving through the lunch rush while her mind churned. Robert left his usual generous tip and a note. Call me when you decide. That evening, Maya sat cross-legged on her bed with her guitar, her phone, and Robert's business card. She'd played her songs hundreds of times alone in this room, singing to the walls, dreaming of what might be while safely avoiding the risk of failure. She thought of Joe's words about his sister, watching young performers with regret in her eyes, of Prisha creating art boldly in public while Maya hid her creativity in napkin scribbles, of the feeling that had washed over her on stage, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Before she could talk herself out of it, she dialed Robert's number. I want to do it, she said when he answered. I want to make a real demo. Good, Robert replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I'll start making calls tomorrow. But Maya, this means you need to be all in. Can you get time off work? Maya took a deep breath. I'll talk to Joe tomorrow. The conversation with Joe the next morning wasn't easy. Standing in his small office before the cafe opened, Maya explained Robert's offer and her decision to pursue it. So you need what exactly? Joe asked, leaning back in his creaking chair. 2 weeks, maybe 3, to record, and possibly a more flexible schedule after that if things move forward. Maya twisted her hands together nervously. I know it's a lot to ask. Joe was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. You know, when I hired you 5 years ago, I thought you'd be here for 6 months before moving on to something bigger. Most young people do. He sighed. I'm not surprised this day finally came. Just surprised it took so long. I might be wasting my time, Maya admitted. This whole thing could lead nowhere. Maybe, but you'll never know unless you try. Joe pulled out the staff schedule. We can manage without you for 3 weeks. After that, we'll figure something out based on what you need. Just don't forget us little people when you're famous, all right? Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. I could never forget this place. The next few days passed in a whirlwind. Robert made calls to old contacts, calling in favors and arranging studio time. Maya selected 10 songs from her catalog to record, spending every free moment practicing and refining them. Word spread throughout the cafe, and soon a small jar appeared on the counter labeled Maya's Demo Fund, collecting tips and small donations from supportive regulars. When her last shift before her break ended, the staff gathered to wish her luck. Chef Lou presented her with a packed lunch for her first studio day. Danny gave her a small notebook for when inspiration strikes. Even Prisha stopped by, handing Maya a sketch she'd made of her performing at the open mic. "For your first album cover," Prisha said with a wink, as Maya packed up her guitar and the folder of lyrics that night. Preparing for her first day in a real recording studio, she found herself returning to the napkin where she'd scribbled the beginning of what would become her demo's title track. "Notes from the cafe," she added a new verse, "taking chances. Feels like falling with no promise where you'll land, but staying still means never knowing the heights to which you might ascend tomorrow would bring a studio full of strangers. Expectations she wasn't sure she could meet, and the terrifying reality of putting her music into the world. But for the first time in her life, Maya wasn't hiding in the safety of someday. Her someday had finally arrived. The recording studio wasn't what Maya had imagined. Instead of the sleek, high-tech space she'd seen in music documentaries, Robert had arranged time at a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town. The walls were lined with worn soundproofing panels, and much of the equipment looked like it had seen better days. But according to Robert, the sound engineer, a bearded man named Pete who looked to be in his 50s, was the best ears in the business. "Don't let the appearance fool you," Robert told her as they set up on the first day. "Some of the most authentic recordings I've ever heard came out of rooms just like this." Maya nodded, trying to hide her nerves as she unpacked her guitar. This was really happening. After years of playing alone in her apartment, she was in an actual recording studio with actual music professionals who were there for her songs. Pete adjusted microphones around Maya's guitar and voice. "We'll start simple," he explained. "Just you and your guitar like you'd play at the cafe. Get a few solid takes, then maybe add some minimal backing if the songs call for it." They began with "Invisible," the song she'd performed at the open mic. Maya's hands trembled through the first take, her voice tight with anxiety. "That was terrible," she said when she finished. "I'm sorry." "First take jitters," Pete said with a shrug. "Happens to everyone. Let's go again." By the third take, Maya had begun to relax into the process. By the fifth, she found the same flow she sometimes reached when playing alone in her apartment. That space where the music moved through her without conscious effort. "That's the one," Robert said from the control room, his voice coming through her headphones. "You feel it?" Maya nodded. She had felt it. Over the next week, they settled into a routine. Maya would arrive at the studio by 9 each morning. They'd work through 2 or 3 songs a day, breaking for lunch, then returning for refinements and occasionally adding simple backing elements, a touch of piano from a session musician Robert knew, some subtle percussion, a hint of bass. At the end of each day, Pete would provide rough mixes for Maya to take home and study. She'd listen obsessively in her apartment, making notes on what worked and what didn't, where her voice faltered or where the emotion wasn't coming through strongly enough. The next morning, she'd return with her notes and they'd work to address any issues. "You've got good instincts," Pete told her after she suggested a change to the bridge of one of her songs. "Some artists can't hear their own work clearly. You can." By the end of the second week, they had recorded all 10 songs. The rough mixes were compiled into a demo that, while not polished like a major label release, captured the raw authenticity of Maya's songwriting. "Now comes the hard part," Robert said as they sat in his car outside the studio on the final day, getting the right people to listen. Maya clutched the USB drive containing her demo. It felt simultaneously weightless and impossibly heavy. "What's next?" "I've set up a few meetings with people I know. Small label executives, a couple of producers, a music publisher. We'll see who bites." Robert's expression was cautiously optimistic. "This is where patience comes in. The industry moves at its own pace." "My 3 weeks away from the cafe are almost up," Maya said, reality setting in. "I need to go back to work." "And you should," Robert agreed. "This part can happen alongside your job. I'll handle the initial outreach." Returning to Sunshine Cafe felt strange after the intensity of the studio experience. Maya tied her apron with a sense of disconnection, as if she were stepping back into an old version of herself that no longer quite fit. "Welcome back, superstar." Danny greeted her with a hug. "How'd it go?" "Good, I think. We finished all the songs." Maya filled a coffee pot, slipping back into the familiar rhythm of the morning rush. Now we wait to see if anyone's interested. Word spread quickly that Maya had returned, and throughout the day, regulars asked about her recording experience. She found herself sharing stories about the studio, the time she'd knocked over a microphone stand in her excitement after a perfect take, or how Pete's ancient cat would sometimes wander through the control room during sessions. Talking about it made the experience feel more real, less like a dream she'd soon wake up from. But as days stretched into a week, then two, with no significant news from Robert, doubt began to creep in. Had she wasted her time and what little savings she had? Had the cafe staff's faith in her been misplaced? These things take time, Robert reminded her when he came in for breakfast. I've got your demo in several good hands. Be patient. Patience had never been Maya's strength. She threw herself back into her work, picking up extra shifts to make up for her absence. At night, she listened to her demo with increasingly critical ears, finding flaws she hadn't noticed before, wondering if they were the reason no one had shown interest yet. Then, 3 weeks after her return to the cafe, disaster struck. Maya was walking home from a late shift, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Inside was her laptop with all her recorded music, including the new demo and years of voice memos, her entire musical history. She stopped at a corner store for a few groceries, setting her backpack beside her while she paid. She realized it was gone just 5 minutes later. In those brief moments of distraction, someone had taken her backpack and with it, everything she'd worked for. I called the police, she told Robert tearfully the next morning when he came in for breakfast. They took a report but said not to get my hopes up. Robert's face fell. What about backup files? Cloud storage? Maya shook her head miserably. I didn't think. She'd always meant to set up proper backups but had never gotten around to it. The demo files were on her laptop and the USB drive, which had been in her backpack as well. Pete might have the session files, Robert said, already pulling out his phone. Let me call him. But Pete had suffered a hard drive failure just days earlier. He'd managed to save most of his current projects, but older sessions, including Maya's, had been lost. He had one rough mix of Invisible that he'd sent to a friend, but the rest was gone. I have to start over, Maya said hollowly when Robert relayed the news. All those songs, all that work. You don't have to start completely from scratch, Robert tried to reassure her. You wrote the songs. They're still in you. But Maya couldn't see past the loss. That night, she didn't pick up her guitar. Or the next night. A week passed where she didn't write a single note or lyric. She went through the motions at work, her smile forced, her once constant humming silenced. Joe noticed the change in her. You hit a setback, he said, finding her staring blankly into the coffee machine one morning. It happens. Doesn't mean you stop. Maybe it's a sign, Maya replied. Maybe I was fooling myself thinking I could actually do this. Or maybe it's a test to see how badly you want it. Maya didn't have an answer for that. The following week, something unexpected happened. During the Monday morning rush, Danny approached her with a puzzled expression. That girl who draws Prisha. She's here and asking for you specifically. Maya found Prisha at a corner table, a large envelope in front of her. Hey, Maya greeted her tiredly. What can I get you? Sit down for a minute, Prisha said, patting the chair next to her. I heard about what happened with your laptop. Maya winced. News travels fast around here. Small communities always talk, but sometimes that's a good thing. Prisha pushed the envelope toward Maya. Open it. Inside were dozens of pieces of paper, napkins, receipt backs, to-go cup sleeves, even a few paper plates. Each had writing on it in Maya's handwriting. What is this? Maya asked, confused. Your songs, Prisha explained. Or parts of them, anyway. I noticed the busboy Teo collecting these whenever he cleared your tables. At first I thought he was just being thorough, but then I realized he was saving them. He's been doing it for years. Maya leafed through the papers, recognizing fragments of lyrics she'd jotted down during breaks or slow periods. Some were from songs she'd recorded for the demo. Others were older, some she'd forgotten entirely. Teo kept these? Maya was stunned. Prisha nodded. In a box in the break room. When he heard about your laptop, he asked me to help organize them. He thought they might help you rebuild. Why would he do that? He believes in your talent. A lot of people here do. Prisha smiled. Sometimes we need others to remember our worth when we forget it ourselves. Maya carefully spread the papers across the table, seeing years of her creativity preserved in these small, fragmented moments. It wasn't everything, far from it, but it was a foundation, a place to restart. "Tell Teo," Maya's voice caught. "Tell him thank you. This means more than he could know." That night, Maya sat on her bedroom floor with the scraps arranged around her. She picked up her guitar for the first time since the theft and began to play, piecing together fragments of melodies and lyrics. Some came back easily, muscle memory guiding her fingers. Others felt like rediscovering old friends. As the night deepened, something shifted within her. The loss still stung, but alongside it grew a determination. She'd done this once. She could do it again. And maybe, just maybe, the songs would be stronger for having been rebuilt. When Maya arrived at the cafe the next morning, she sought out Teo, the quiet busboy who had saved pieces of her dream without her ever knowing. He was in the back, loading the dishwasher. "Prisha gave me the songs you saved," she said simply. "I don't know how to thank you." Teo shrugged, looking embarrassed. "Your music is special. It shouldn't be thrown away." Maya pulled a folded paper from her pocket, a new song she'd written overnight, inspired by her loss and the unexpected gift of rediscovery. "This one's for you," she said, handing it to him. First person to hear it, and for the first time in weeks, Maya began to hum as she worked. The next few weeks brought a transformation to Sunshine Cafe. Word spread about Teo's collection of Maya's lyrics, and soon other staff members came forward with their own saved scraps. Danny had kept a notepad where she'd written down phrases she'd overheard Maya singing while working. Chef Lou, surprisingly, had memorized entire choruses from listening to her hum in the kitchen. "You've got quite the fan club here," Robert commented one morning as he watched Maya compile these fragments at a corner table before her shift. "I had no idea they were even listening," she replied, still amazed by the support. "All this time I thought my music was just background noise to them." "People notice authentic passion," Robert said. "It's rare enough to stand out." Maya's determination had returned stronger than before. She spent every spare moment rebuilding her songs from memory and the collected fragments. Some nights she stayed at the cafe after closing, sitting in the quiet space where her musical journey had truly begun, letting the familiar surroundings jog her memory. Joe had given her a key and his blessing. "Consider it your second studio." One evening, as Maya worked through a particularly challenging bridge she couldn't quite remember, Robert arrived unexpectedly, carrying a small digital recorder. "I thought we could try something," he said, pulling up a chair. "Play what you've got and we'll record it here." Sometimes the acoustic of a special place can capture something a studio can't. Maya positioned herself by the window, where the evening light cast long shadows across the empty tables. She began to play Invisible, the song that had started everything. The version that emerged was different from the studio recording, rawer, with small lyric changes that reflected her recent experiences. When she finished, Robert nodded thoughtfully. "There's something about this place that brings out your best. The acoustics aren't perfect, but the feeling," an idea sparked in Maya's eyes. "What if we recorded here? A live session after hours. Simple setup, just capture the songs in the place that inspired them." "A cafe recording?" Robert considered it. "It's unconventional, but that could work in our favor. Give your demo a unique quality." He paused. "But we'd need equipment." "Pete's studio gear is booked solid for the next month." "What about a video?" came a voice from the doorway. Prisha stood there, having arrived to meet Maya as they'd planned. "Sorry, couldn't help overhearing. But I have friends who make short films. They have decent equipment. Cameras, mics, lights." Maya and Robert exchanged looks. "A live video session," Robert mused. "Even better for getting attention in today's market." Over the next few days, a plan took shape. Prisha's filmmaker friends agreed to help, excited by the creative project. Joe approved using the cafe after hours on a Sunday when they closed early. Staff members volunteered to help move tables, set up lights, and even appear as background audience. "We can't pay much," Maya warned everyone. "Payment is watching you succeed," Joe replied, and the others nodded in agreement. The night of the recording arrived faster than Maya expected. The cafe had been transformed. Tables pushed to create a small performance space, string lights hung from the ceiling, candles on every surface. Pete had managed to borrow some basic recording equipment, ensuring the audio would be professional quality even if the setting wasn't a traditional studio. Robert had invited a few key industry contacts, people who hadn't responded, to the original demo, but might be intrigued by the unusual approach of a cafe recording. No pressure, he told Maya. Just play like you're performing for friends because you are. Maya took her position, surrounded by familiar faces: Danny, Joe, Chef Lou, Teo, and the other cafe staff. Prisha sat sketching in the corner as she always did. Robert stood in the back, beside three people Maya didn't recognize but assumed were his industry connections. This first song is called Notes from the Cafe, Maya said into the microphone, her voice steadier than she expected. I wrote it on napkins and receipts right here where I'm standing. It's about finding your voice in unexpected places. As she began to play, the nervousness that had plagued her first performances melted away. This was her space, these were her people, and these were her stories. The song flowed naturally, a melody that spoke of daily moments that build into something meaningful, of dreams deferred but not abandoned, of finding extraordinary courage in ordinary places. When the final note faded, there was a moment of complete silence before the small audience erupted in applause. Maya moved seamlessly into her next song and the next, playing through the rebuilt versions of her original demo plus two new songs that had emerged from her recent experiences, one about loss and rebuilding, another about the invisible support systems that carry us through difficult times. Between songs, she shared brief stories about their origins, how certain lyrics had come to her while refilling sugar containers, or how a particular customer's conversation had inspired a chorus. These personal touches transformed the performance from a simple music showcase into a narrative about creativity found in unexpected corners of everyday life. After the final song, as the small audience cheered, Maya noticed one of Robert's industry guests approach him, speaking animatedly while glancing in her direction. Another was on the phone, stepping outside but giving Maya a thumbs up as he passed. That was something special, Pete said as he began packing up the recording equipment. Really special. We captured magic tonight. Over the next few days, Pete worked on mixing the live recordings while Prisha's friends edited the video footage. Maya returned to her regular shifts at the cafe, but something had shifted in how customers interacted with her. Word of the recording session had spread, and people began requesting that waitress who sings. Joe, ever the businessman, suggested a regular music night featuring Maya and other local performers. Turns out having our own in-house musician is good for business, he told her with a wink. 1 week after the recording, Robert arrived at the cafe with a broad smile that Maya could see through the window before he even entered. He carried a tablet under his arm and could barely wait for her to finish serving a table before pulling her aside. We've got interest, he said, his voice vibrant with excitement. Serious interest. Not from the major labels, they're dinosaurs anyway, but from Harbor Light Records. The indie label? Maya had heard of them. They represented several artists she admired. Yes, they specialize in authentic singer-songwriters. Their A&R rep was one of the people at your cafe session. Robert handed her the tablet. They posted your video on their social media channels last night. Maya stared at the screen, seeing herself performing in the cafe. Under the heading, Discovered Cafe Sessions with Maya Santos. The view counter was already in the thousands, comments flooding in beneath. They're offering a development deal. Robert continued. It's modest, but it's real. 1 EP with an option for a full album if things go well. Creative control remains mostly with you. They want to build on what you've already created, not change it. The reality of what was happening washed over Maya in waves. This wasn't just a dream anymore. This wasn't scribbled lyrics on napkins or songs sung to her apartment walls. This was an actual beginning. What do you think? She asked Robert, still staring at the video of herself. I think you earned this, he replied simply. Not just through talent, but through resilience. That's what separates those who make it from those who don't in this business. 2 months later, Maya stood in a professional recording studio, laying down tracks for her debut EP titled Cafe Confessions. The songs were the same ones performed that night at Sunshine, with minimal production added, just enough to enhance without overshadowing the raw authenticity that had attracted attention in the first place. The cafe had become something of a local attraction, with weekends now featuring Maya Santos night when she wasn't recording. Joe had expanded the performance space, and other local musicians had begun appearing regularly. We might need to change our name to Sunshine Music Cafe, Joe joked one evening, as Maya prepared for her weekend performance. I don't know, Maya replied, looking around at the place that had held her dreams for so long. I think Notes from the Cafe has a nice ring to it, as she took her now familiar spot by the window. Guitar in hand, Maya caught sight of a new waitress hurriedly scribbling something on a napkin during her break, then tucking it into her apron with a secretive smile. Maya recognized that look, the one that said there were words inside that needed to come out. After her set, Maya approached the new waitress. I noticed you writing earlier, she said gently. Songs, poetry? The young woman looked startled, then embarrassed. Just silly lyrics. Nothing serious. Maya smiled, remembering herself not so long ago. I used to hide my songs on napkins too. This place has a way of bringing music out of people. She gestured around the cafe. Keep writing. You never know where it might lead. As the new waitress returned to work, Maya caught Robert's eye across the room. He raised his coffee cup in a silent toast to how far she had come, from hiding her talent to sharing it, from serving coffee to serving inspiration. The journey hadn't been direct or easy, but looking back, Maya wouldn't have changed a single note.